Welcome to the Murabiyoon Show, raising awareness of Islamic schools. Another episode, and this one I'm really excited. And this one's called Let Children Be Children.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the gems and the lessons and the takeaways we can take from this particular concept.
MashaAllah, we alluded to that. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala rasulullah, ba'd. We alluded to this episode, I think, in one of the previous episodes, that there is an aspect that sometimes we forget, which is let children be children. And we sort of force on them certain, realities before they are ready for it.
Sure.
Sometimes we wait too long with tarbiyah, and sometimes we force them into certain realities they're not ready for. And so we need to find the balance. And so you have as well in the ayah that was displayed at the beginning of the episode, protect yourselves, O believers, protect yourself and your families from the fire. So there is an important aspect of safeguarding,
Sure.
right? But then there is also an aspect of letting go, of let children play, let children explore. And we well know that the Prophet ﷺ was praying in the masjid, and Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein were literally jumping on his back ﷺ when he was making sajda. Right? Imagine this today. Imagine this in a masjid. Imagine this happening. What would happen? What would be the reaction?
It depends what masjid you're in, first and foremost, but there'd be a bit of an outcry.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, a personal experience on this. So I think probably going back a couple of months ago, actually, I heard this again, and every time when you hear something, you take wisdom from it. And I heard it, and so mashallah, my daughters are quite young, so they're in the habit of doing that. And I understood that the Prophet ﷺ stayed in sujood longer, so he didn't disrupt their play or something along those lines.
Something to that effect, yes.
Yeah. And I remember taking that and thinking to myself, and I literally found myself doing it.
Okay.
I thought, okay, you know what? Let me be a bit more patient, because what was happening was that I was becoming impatient leading up to that. But alhamdulillah, it's good to be reminded.
Yes, and so what we need to learn is that children are children, and especially if they're in the first 7 years, as we have mentioned in the 777 cycle. I don't want this to be turned in the wrong way, though, right? Sure. We don't want to turn the masjid into a playground or a circus. That should not be, and we should definitively teach the children, especially when they reach a certain age, to be disciplined inside the masjid, have certain adab, and honoring the masjid is the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You keep quiet and so on and so forth. You teach. But if it happens, and when it happens, that we have children, and sometimes you're muttar, you have to do it, maybe no one at home, and sometimes you're on a journey, or children just pop in and they do what they do. Yeah. I watched a video the other day, a child just took his opportunity. They were all lined up, and they were in the tashahhud, and he just goes one by one, puff, 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 puff. It's just, I was on, I don't know, on Instagram or something. It just took his opportunity, and it looks, it's just going, tak, 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 tak. And so they will do these things. How do you react? That is the important question here, right? Because children will do it. And so at that moment, we see that the Prophet ﷺ was showing mercy, was showing a certain way of dealing with children. We will speak a little bit more about behavior management in a later episode, inshallah. But let children be children is something that is slowly but surely getting erased from our busy lives.
Why is it important for us to maintain that? And I know you're going to talk about the fitrah of a child, but why is it important for us to maintain that and understand that?
Yeah, so the fitrah of a child, we'll speak about that maybe a bit later, but the fitrah of a child is this innate, God-given nature, how every one of us is born, born with tawheed, born with an inclination to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the way we learn that from the hadith, the way you educate your child, literally this fitrah can get clouded. And our belief is that whenever you whenever you undo this, and you find your inner fitrah, it will always lead you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, the same way we have to protect the fitrah, and we have to nurture them in the fitrah with the right stories and the right environment, we have other aspects of education that are as important as well. So in that primary school age, for example, one of the important aspects of teaching is obviously character, and we'll speak about that later, and fitrah, we'll speak about that later, but one of them is creativity.
Sure.
And let children be children means don't put too stringent rules around their world.
Sure.
We spoke already about discipline and how we need to have discipline. We'll speak about that as well, maybe a little bit later. But in this episode, really, I try to focus on one thing, which is let them explore. Sure. Let them find. Let them make a mistake. Let them not being educated out of their creativity.
Sure.
Just because you did it this way doesn't mean that everyone has to do it that way. I know it sounds very Western, but it is actually not very Western. It is actually a very prophetic approach.
Sure.
Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. You can see the Sahaba children, radiallahu anhum, playing in the streets, and he's teaching them, guiding them to give the street and the road its due, right. But you can see him engaging with the shabab and being out there. So there's always this aspect, don't educate your child out of creativity.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting, because again, it's kind of to some extent, it's the complete opposite of kind of having this rigid kind of structured, knowledge-based, this is what you're coming to learn, and this is what you're going to this is the exam that you're going to sit at the end of it. But
not just that, but I mean, let's be honest, in many families, Muslim families here, we draw the pathway for our children with the outcome being one of three. That's your job. You can either be a doctor or what?
Engineer.
An engineer, and maybe an accountant. Maybe. Yeah. But you have already very much decided 20 years down the line what your child is going to be. Yeah. And I don't think that is healthy. You're limiting their creativity, you're limiting talents, and we need talents. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum. I'll give you a name, you give me their talent.
Oh wow, you're going to put me on the spot now.
No. Let's do this together, inshallah. I know maybe the audience can do that as well. Here we go. Let's start with Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali radiallahu anhum.
What was their talent?
Yeah, generally. Leadership, definitively. Khulafa Rashidin, right? I mean, many other talents as well, but one being leadership. That's why they were the Khulafa Rashidin, right? Let's go on with Khalid ibn Walid.
He was a warrior. He was a leader. He was courageous.
Army general. Tactics.
Tactician. Strategy.
Strategic. Yeah. So we got that talent there as well, right? What about Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anhu? Being sent to Medina ahead of the Hijrah. Okay,
so somebody, like if I was to relate it today, like somebody who's going out to scope something out, somebody who's going to...
Like a scout, or ambassador.
Yeah?
Da'wah, right? Da'wah. There we go. So what about Bilal ibn Rabah?
I'm not familiar with that Sahaba.
Bilal.
Oh, is it Bilal?
Radiallahu anhu.
Okay. What did you say? Bilal?
Ibn Rabah.
Ibn Rabah, I never heard of Ibn Rabah. Okay, so one particular, are we talking about skill that he had?
Yeah, skill or talent in general, yeah.
Okay, so he was, he was the muaddin.
The muaddin of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, exactly.
Yeah, yes. So he was, he would have had a
melodious voice.
A voice, he would have had a certain something as an image as well, to be the face of the kind of the call to prayer.
Good.
He'd had to talk the talk and walk the walk to fulfill that.
Yes. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ said about him, he heard the footsteps of Bilal in Jannah and so on and so forth. So, what about Ka'b ibn Malik and Hassan ibn Thabit?
I don't know.
Poets
of
the Prophet ﷺ. So literacy comes into play here. What about Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh and Aisha radiallahu anha?
They were scholars,
particular muhaddithin, right? having a huge number of ahadith reported from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What about Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhuma?
Again, these are scholars
with a specific talent, maybe in tafsir,
tafsir.
right? And ahkam generally, and so on and so forth. One last one, Rufayda al-Islamiyya.
I'm not familiar with the name.
Medicine, right? Nursing. Okay. What I'm trying to picture here is that was a community in Medina.
Yeah.
Do we have one talent?
We have many talents.
Plenty of talents.
Yeah.
And so the question really comes, how do we nurture those talents? How do we nurture those talents? If we make it too rigid and we draw the pathway for our children, especially to, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be an engineer, you're going to be an accountant, we're limiting to those 3, 4, 5 jobs, where the talent may be somewhere completely different. So how do we do that then? We nurture creativity. That's why it is important to nurture creativity. And that creativity is nurtured especially at primary school age. Academic is important. It's important to, empower them with certain basic skills and important skills in maths and literacy and so on and so forth. But the most, in my personal view, the most important after Tawheed and Fitrah and behavior, adab, is creativity in primary school age. Because creativity will lead to talents. You're nurturing talents. You are nurturing them. You let them explore, let them make mistakes, let them, find out, let them... imagine the Prophet ﷺ would have just, everybody come to the masjid, we're just making ulama out of all of you. Forget about your talents. Forget about your professions. From today, everybody is doing hifz. Everybody is doing, and we're spending the next, just in the masjid for the next 10 years. And that's not how it works. And what we need to do is, we love the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We need to try to not just talk to talk, but walk to walk. Yeah. If you love the Prophet ﷺ, then adopt some of those ways as well. I don't know.
Ustadh, I'm going to ask you to give your final thoughts on this, but what advice would you give young people who want to be creative, who want to express themselves, but struggling themselves? Maybe they're finding that the Islamic Tarbiyah model is too rigid.
No, it's not. It's not. We make it too rigid. That's the problem. Break the barriers. Break the barriers. I mean, a lot of our children grow up in big cities nowadays, in London and other cities, right? And they have a very, very confined kind of view of the world. And so what we need to do is we need to open that up. Forget about... The norm is, you go to school, you come home, you play some PlayStation or whatever you do, watch some YouTube, and then you go to bed and, next day repeat. Let's break those barriers a little bit. Let's take our children out. Let's go for some camping trips. Let's go for some hiking. Let's go for some traveling. Let's go for some clubs, after-school clubs. The biggest difference between state sectors and very famous, posh, independent schools is literally, yes, in the teachers sometimes, but one of the biggest differentiation is the amount of after-school clubs they have. They expose them to everything from, sailing to ice skating to hockey to traveling, mechanics. Everything is there. So open it up for your children. Let them explore. Let them see. Let them make a mistake. Let them be bored sometimes. No problem with that. Just shut down a little bit. Just time out, think, do some muhasabah, reflection. Something that really impressed me, and it is very much in line with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, is what the late Sir Ken Robinson said in one of his TED Talks. And it's very, very, very relevant, which is that we have no clue, I'm paraphrasing here, we have no clue how the world will look like in 10 years from now. I have no clue. I mean, if you just look at the the last 10 years, the iPhone is only about, 12, 13 years old. And that was the introduction of the smartphone. And what happened in the last decade since then?
Yes,
Can you imagine like a life without a smartphone nowadays? It's like people like get mad if they don't have their phone for an hour, you know. No, there was a time where we didn't have phones, and then there was a time we had brick phones, and then there was a time, you know.
We didn't have color on the phone.
So your education did not include a smartphone.
No.
It barely included internet.
That's right.
Correct? Yet today, in professional work everywhere,
Can't function without it.
you can't function. So in the same manner then, if that is the last 10 years, now look at the next 10 years or 20 years, AI coming, artificial intelligence. Every major company, not even major, every company in the world will need an artificial intelligence specialist, engineer. Yet we don't have that yet. Yet we are trying to educate our children to work in 12 years, 15 years, 20 years, in that environment that we have no clue how it will look like. So how do we do that? How do we educate some? We may miseducate them, right? So what we need to try to do is give them certain skills that will enable them to adapt. Okay? Adapt to whatever will come. Some basic academics, some basic knowledge, and you know, we can go deep or less deep, you know, maths, literacy, geography, history, and so on and so forth. Really important about reading and so on and so forth. They always stay there. But then on top of that, skills, capability of adapting to your environment, adapting to see that, creativity, to fine tune and so on and so forth. So these are really, really important things. Yet many of us, many schools and many parents are sort of closing that gap and make it very, very rigid. And in that, closing off too many talents that we have in our ummah and not allowing them to benefit the ummah in the way that maybe they could have brought benefit to our ummah. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Shaykh.
Allah barak fikum.